Well, welcome everyone. And for folks online, I can't really see, so I'm gonna go stand right here. Thank you everyone so much for coming for our second session. Welcome. We're not going to do introductions today. We're just going to get right into the presentation so that we can keep going on time. But I just want to introduce first our guest, our facilitator, our lovely presenter today. So I'll just read a short bio about him and then we'll get started. So his name is Riley. Riley is a PhD. Riley Tuff is a PhD candidate at the University of Manitoba in the Department of Medical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases. That's where we are right here. His research focuses on identifying how ancestry can influence HIV disease progression by working with a large cohort from Pumwani. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Kenya. Mr. Tuff is a member of the board of directors for the Canadian Association of HIV Research and the executive committee of the Prairie Infectious Immunology Network. During his time as a graduate student, Mr. Tuff has assisted in overseeing provincial and national conferences and workshops, but his main aspiration is to finally graduate. So welcome, Riley. We're so happy to have you. So we're going to get into the topic of today in a moment. So first, like last time, we're just going to pass out a quick free test, and then Mariana will send it to the folks online. So we'll ask you to do that. And yeah, then we'll get right into the topic. And does everyone have a pen? So there's a couple questions on the back as well. Yeah. Remember the pre-test is, we're not grading it, there's no, just to, yeah. And see what your knowledge level is of the topic for the test.
What does Commonwealth mean? Okay. Okay.
He will explain.
Okay.
That's what that is what is on the left, but just guess. Whatever sounds for you. You.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah. I don't see that. Sorry. No, I went here. And everyone, well, after this one. All right, well, I think if everyone is done, how are folks online doing? Good? You'll need a minute? Okay. One more minute, and then we will get into the presentation. I think we should be good to get started. So yeah, we'll pass it over to Riley.
Perfect. Everybody can hear me? It's not too loud. I don't know how to change it if it is. That's perfect. Today we're going to be talking about from germs to genes, understanding our immune system. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I've been a PhD student here for too long to remember. I think it's been about 5 or 6 years, and my background is studying human genetics. So we'll end on that topic as well. At any point, I won't be able to see any messages coming up in the chat. So if you have questions, yes, feel free to interrupt me at any point. If you're here, raise a hand, give me a wave. This is going to be aimed to be more of a discussion than a formal presentation. So if you have any questions along the way, need something explained a little bit more, I'm happy to help there. But so I just want to start by acknowledging the lands in which I live and play and where we currently are. I live out in Headingley, Manitoba, and I spend my summers out in the Whiteshell on Treaty 3 territory. These are the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people on the homeland of the Métis Nation. So today, actually, let me get a timer here. Today we are going to be talking about what are germs or microbes. How does our body protect us? What are genes and why do they matter? And then we'll summarize some of the key points at the end. Pretty much the answers to that pre and post test. So what are microbes? What do people think of when you hear the term microbe? Does anything immediately come to mind?
Very, very tiny, because that's what micro is.
Exactly.
Blood.
Blood? Okay, yeah. So exactly. Microbes are tiny microorganisms. These are typically thought of to be bacteria, fungus. They are all around us, and they are crucial for every aspect of life on Earth. So microbes, most people think of something like a fungus. So microbes come in many forms. My favorite form is fungi. These are living microbes. These are considered to be macroscopic, so they're larger than your typical bacteria. And on the left here, you can see a fly agaric mushroom. You know, mushrooms are a pretty substantial size, and these consume dead materials. A common example of this might be Blastomyces dermatitidis. This is a fungus that causes skin infections. It's rare in other parts of Canada, but fairly common in Manitoba and northwestern Ontario. Other types of microbes include parasites. So once again, these are considered to be living. These are microscopic, so you need a microscope to see them, and they have a very complex lifestyle. So you might
What's the
think of
difference?
something like Plasmodium. This
What's
is
the-
known
sorry.
as malaria. So malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes. It has a very complex life cycle, as opposed to something like a fungus. Bacteria, once again, considered to be living. This means that they can move around, they ingest nutrients, they expel waste. You need a microscope to see the vast majority of these. And these, similar to what is seen here, have these little tiny hairs on the outside of them. I don't know if the owl can see that as well. But this allows them to move around quite easily. An example of that is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And last are viruses. Viruses are considered to be non-living microbes because they need a host in order to survive. They can't survive on their own. And these need a very strong microscope to be able to see them. And an example of this would be human immunodeficiency virus, something that our lab studies. Microbes are found virtually everywhere. You can find them in pretty much every water sample, soil sample. You can find them on the bark of trees, on leaves, even circulating in the air. So if you go outside, air samples generally have viruses just naturally circulating in them as well. It's really fascinating how they're all around us. You can find them on your skin and even inside of your body. And there's a lot of these microbes that are very important for human health, such as those inside of the gut and intestinal tract. So these microbes live inside of your body and they have a lot of very important functions. So our body can't really break down a lot of heavy vegetable matter. And so you have these bacteria that live inside of your gut that help to break down that plant matter and turn it into something that your body can use. And these are called commensal bacteria. Commensal meaning that they live in harmony with your body and they actually help you to break down that nutrient. There's an online question.
We have, from Jacqueline, what's the difference between microbes and probiotics?
What is the difference between microbes and probiotics? That's a great question. So probiotics are a type of microbe. Typically, if you have something, I'm going to go to the example of Activia because I used to eat a lot of Activia. It contains some healthy bacteria in there that's supposed to help out your gut. So when we're talking about these commensal bacteria that live in your gut, probiotics is one example of that. So the idea is by ingesting probiotics, you help out those healthy communities in your body. And so it actually helps to populate your gut lining with them, which is a little bit questionable, but probiotics are a very popular topic. When we talk about the organisms living in our body, we have bacteria, and recent evidence suggests that there are viruses and fungus as well that live pretty happily, and they actually have important roles in our natural life. Now, we have different microbes on our skin, bacteria, fungus. We have them inside of our body, but there's three main ways that harmful microbes, such as pathogens, ones that can cause disease, enter our body. Let me see if I can move this to a different region. All right. So ways that microbes enter our body is really through three main routes, I would say. The first is ingestion. This is why we obviously have to cook pork and beef to kill any E. coli that's inside of there before we ingest it. Why we wash vegetables as well as it goes into our body, it's there. And otherwise your body has to deal with it in its own way. The other way, as we've learned over the last 3 years, inhalation, especially for respiratory pathogens, is one of the ways that microbes can enter our body. And the last way is through different types of contact. This can be sexual contact. This can be a mosquito landing on your skin and biting you. This can be through a handshake. When you shake hands with somebody else, you're passing along all those microbes on your hand to somebody else. If you touch a doorknob, you're picking up those microbes. And the issue with that is that if you touch your eyes, you touch your nose, your mouth, then you're putting those microbes on your face and you're inhaling them, and there's a potential for them to go into your lungs, into your mouth, etc. So we have these healthy bacteria. They're called commensal. They have many different purposes on our body. One of which is to make it more difficult for pathogenic fungus to actually colonize or sit on top of our skin and grow on top of our skin. So when they're in their healthy spot, those are good bacteria. However, if they move from, for example, the top of your skin into your lungs, then they can become pathogenic. Then they can cause disease as well. A common example of this would be if you go to the doctor's office and you're getting blood taken. You have to take that alcohol wipe and clean that area first before you have a needle to take blood, because you don't want any of those microbes on your skin to be pushed into your bloodstream, right? Because then they can disseminate through your body, go to different areas, end up in your lungs. So it's very important to know that these bacteria can have problems if they go to somewhere else.
Can that also be like if you really get like a piss test or something?
So whenever you are doing any sort of tests, you want to make sure that it's sterile. You want to make sure that you don't have bacteria going to different spots as well. For those types of tests as well, you just have to be sure that you're not touching other things, because then you have the chance of introducing other bacteria as well. Especially when you have, for example, at home, I'll give you the example of my home. I have bread that I sometimes leave out on the counter and I forget to put away. And very rapidly, you can see mold starting to grow on it. right? So you just have to be very conscious that microbes are all around us. And the longer that you study microbes in school, the more aware of germs you are and the more germophobic you become. And you start washing your hands way more than I did before I entered school. But a common question that I get is, why don't we get sick every time a pathogen enters our body? Right? Because they're all around us, we're constantly breathing them in. Why don't we get sick more frequently? And the question also becomes, how much pathogen or how much of these microbes are you breathing in? So let's say there's somebody on this side of the screen and they sneeze, right? So you have this large spray of something like the common cold or influenza moving through the air. Now, if you just inhale one of these particles, oh, yes.
Jacqueline asked, does microbes cause skin illnesses such as MRSA or something that can be positively affected by antibiotics?
Yeah. So we're actually gonna go back to here for this one. So a lot of people, they have bacteria that live on their skin that cause no harm whatsoever. One example of that is called MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. The name of it doesn't matter. But the problem is whenever you get an abrasion, a cut, a burn on your skin, then it opens up an area for those bacteria to get in. So it's something like MRSA, if it's living happily on your skin, not causing an infection, if it gets into your skin, then it can cause problems as well. Very good question. So when we're determining, when somebody is getting sick, when you're breathing in these microbes, so if you're breathing in one virus, it's probably not going to cause illness. It has to go into your nose, into your respiratory tract, and cause infection. However, if somebody right in front of you sneezes and you breathe all of that in, there's a good chance that you're going to get sick from it. Different types of bacteria. Some are very infectious. It takes one or two of them present on contact in order to get infected. Others can take hundreds. So it depends on what the microbe is, how infectious is it. And so there's a wide variety of these. But once it enters your body, this is kind of what I think is one of the coolest things, is the innate immune system. This is your first line of defense for when anything enters your body. Whether or not it's flu, whether or not it's any type of virus, bacteria, parasite, this is your first line of defense. And so your innate immune system comprises of different barriers that make it more difficult for microbes or pathogens to enter your body. One of which is your skin. Now, it might be a weird concept that your skin is part of your immune system, but I think it's really cool because this is your first line of defense. So you have to make sure that you take care of it. If you have any cuts, they have to be covered. Any wounds, they have to be cleaned in order to prevent anything from getting in. Now, my favorite part of the innate immune system, I'm going to say, is crying. How many people, like when you are just living your life, get a piece of dust in your eye, you think a mosquito has flown in your eye, and you immediately start tearing up, right? I think we can all agree it's happened to us at some point or another. And that's because our tears are very salty. They contain different chemicals to help reduce the effects of pathogens, kill pathogens. So when something gets in your eye, you obviously don't want an infection there. So your body's natural response is to start crying. I think it's one of the coolest things. And once it formally gets into your body, then you have different cells. So these particular cells, called macrophages, what they do is when there's a pathogen or infectious microbe in your body, these go up to them, engulf them, completely surround them, ingest them, and start breaking them down. So this is your first line of defense, your innate immune system. Now, there's a lot of times where your innate immune system encounters something for the first time and is unable to clear it, right? A lot of us, I'm sure over the years, have gotten the flu, gotten the common cold, and it takes quite a long time to get over it. And so if something is removed by your innate immune system, you might not see any harmful effects of it. You might not feel overly sick, maybe a day or two, but when it starts lasting longer, you need something a little more combative to get rid of those pathogens. And that's where the adaptive immune system comes in. Now, whereas the innate immune system can be seen as the first line of defense or barrier, your T and B cells are really the frontline fighters against different pathogens. So we're just going to focus on two types here, T cells, B cells, and what happens when you get the pathogen into your body. So what the height of this shows is how strong your immune response is. How much effort is your body exerting to get rid of a pathogen? And on the x-axis here is the amount of time that this takes, or days. So the longer we go out, this is, you've had it for 1, 2, 3, 7 days. And this first part of this is your body says, there's something in here that should not be in here, right? It might be the flu virus, it might be common cold, different bacteria. Maybe I didn't cook the chicken all the way through and it's E. coli coming into my body, which has definitely happened before. And so this is where my body is recognizing something is wrong. So you have these cells that say, hey, I'm part of the innate immune system. I ate this bacteria that came into your body. Something's not right here. And it tells these other cells, maybe you should look into this a little bit more. There's something in here that we have to get rid of. And that's when your body says, it is go time. So they start expanding. You get a lot of cells in your body that say, okay, we are looking for an E. coli that came in with chicken this time around. We need to start building up more cells to get rid of that infection. So as you have more bacteria growing in your body, you have more of these cells. And it's a race to see which is going to grow faster. And then you have these B cells. I consider them to be almost like archers inside of the body. They release these cool molecules called antibodies. And so these are specific to things like E. coli, flu, when your body detects it. And so you can see on this example of over time here, we have two different bugs. We have E. coli, and let's say the flu virus. And you have these cool little molecules here that kind of latch onto it. It's like arrows hitting some sort of microbe in the body. And it targets them for degradation. It says, okay, we've identified them, let's get rid of them from the body. And then you have these T cells that directly interact with cells. These can be cells that are infected with viruses, and they start to get rid of them. And over time, your adaptive immunity begins to wane. And your body says, okay, we've cleared the pathogen, let's go back to a normal state. And you actually generate these cells that remember that pathogen for a long period of time, so that if you ever encounter it again, this process is much faster. And this is really the basis for vaccines. So instead of needing your body to encounter a pathogen for the first time, such as the measles virus, chickenpox virus that we have up here right now, whether it's the flu or a new pathogen, what a vaccine does is say, this is what we're going to be looking for in the future. When it arrives, we're going to be ready and we can eliminate it more quickly within the body. So our immune system is comprised of the innate immune system, which is barriers such as the skin, and the adaptive immune system is more what's targeting it, what's getting it out of your body as quickly as possible. But the problem really comes down to, right, we have microbes all over our skin, in the air, flying around. How does our body know what is healthy and what's not healthy? And this comes down to something called the hygiene hypothesis. This was something that when I first heard it, I thought it was the coolest thing. So our body needs to be able to know what is a problem and what isn't. And when our body isn't able to identify that, then that's when we start running into things like autoimmune disorders, Crohn's disease. Because if you have these good, happy, necessary bacteria going to other parts of your body can say, maybe these are a problem and start eliminating them. So it can actually cause different problems where your body isn't able to know what is healthy and what isn't anymore. And so this can result in more allergies. The hygiene hypothesis really boils down to the idea that when you grow up in an environment such as a farm or an environment with a dog, you're going to be less prone to allergies in the future because you have that dog coming home that's been rolling outside, dog comes in, kisses you in the face, and then you have all of those microbes on your body. And only a small proportion of microbes actually cause disease. So your body is getting all of these different microbes and it's able to say, this is a problem, this isn't a problem. And dogs are fantastic for that reason. They really help to reduce allergies in kids. But when you have two people, let's say that dogs come in, it's licking you in the face, licks you, licks somebody else in the home, one of you gets sick. Why do different people respond differently to the same infection? And this is really where I want to end up talking a little bit about genetics, a little bit about the environment as well. So there's two main reasons why people might respond differently to the same infection. This can be caused by environment. So people generally think when you do a lot of exercise, when you have a healthy diet, maybe something in that can reduce flu infections and reduce different viral infections. And that's absolutely true. Different lifestyle practices can improve or worsen different types of infection. But a lot of some of that also boils down to our genetics for DNA. And so I'll definitely break down this concept. So our DNA is our body blueprint. This is located in all of our cells. Our DNA tells our body what it needs to make, what genes to make. So genes are the functional components of our DNA. We have a lot of different genes in our body that regulate all of our different traits. Genes are the functional component of our DNA. So our DNA is our blueprint and it's telling our body how our hair is supposed to look. You know, are we going to be bald later in life? It can give you a good prediction of these different traits. Height, weight, lactose intolerance, for myself personally, you know, all of this kind of boils down to who we are. And this is inherited from our parents. So genetics, it's in my genes. So I did a 23andMe ancestry test a little while back, and it looks at your DNA and it tells you, okay, so we analyzed a large amount of people and we found that individuals who have a fear of heights have particular DNA sequences. We have a huge amount of DNA sequences inside of our body. So they're picking out ones that they think represent different traits from different studies. So this is things like hair thickness. Do you have flat feet? Do you have a fear of public speaking? A fear of heights? And what this boils down to is who we are as a person. This image on the far right, this image here is my dad in 2012, when we were hiking down in South America. And on the right is a picture of me in 2017. And I definitely have to say that my DNA might make me more like my dad than I would think, especially because we look very similar in these two photos. And so viruses, they lack this complete blueprint. So whereas we encode all of the genes that we need to survive, that we need to go hiking, that we need to look like our dad, viruses don't have that. They have a genetic component and they have an outer shell for them. But so in the context of something like HIV disease, viruses with this incomplete blueprint need certain aspects of that human blueprint in order to cause and maintain infection. So on the right here, we have HIV and we have a CD4 positive T cell. So this is the cell that HIV predominantly infects. And these down here, all you need to know about them is these are human genes on the outside of cells, or human proteins on the outside of cells, I should say, that the virus has to bind to in order to get in. So it doesn't encode these itself, but it has to utilize ones that already exist on human cells. And so if the human blueprint doesn't contain one of these, for example, if somebody doesn't have a functional copy of a gene called CCR5, they actually don't have this outer protein here that the virus needs to get into the cell. So HIV, if this was a particular cell that doesn't have CCR5, this human protein, the virus isn't able to get into the cell. And so there's some people who naturally don't have this protein. I believe it's about 10% of Europeans don't have one copy. A fraction of that don't have two copies. But so we can use that knowledge as a researcher in order to help guide the development of drugs in order to mimic that. So there is an anti-HIV therapeutic called Maraviroc, which does something similar. So individuals who have this protein CCR5, Maraviroc takes a molecule and binds to that same location so that HIV can't bind there. And so it's one of the ways that a therapeutic can mimic something seen in human populations to prevent new infections. And this ability to use our DNA in order to predict immune health with different genes isn't limited to just HIV. It can be included for viruses. It can be included for things like age-related macular degeneration. So if you have certain regions of your DNA that are typically seen with age-related macular degeneration, doctors, as well as these tests, can let you know if you're at an increased or decreased risk for them. So for example, this is my DNA test right here. I'm at an increased risk for age-related macular degeneration. So I can make lifestyle changes and use that information to be more aware currently of my own life and to try to be aware of those. And this is some of the work that we do at a population level. So we look at DNA and we look at specifically in the context of HIV here. On the y-axis, we have CD4 positive T cells. This just represents your immune response. And in red is the amount of HIV in the blood. And so during infection, you have this peak of the virus, this period of time where the amount of virus decreases in the body. And there's a period of the latent phase where the amount of virus remains relatively constant. This is referred to as the set point viral load. So this lasts from weeks to years. And what we do is we ask the question of, is there any regions of the DNA that's associated with a higher or lower set point viral load? So we can look into them further and see if that information can help guide the development of new therapeutics. So when you have just one person's DNA, doesn't mean much, but when you do this on a larger scale, it can help to inform different research policies. Question, yeah.
So do you think that the majority of us that have HIV, if we were to all test our DNA, there would be something in common that relates to like this DNA and how you're more prone to have HIV or something?
I would say probably not. Just because when you're looking at these DNA sequences, it's,
Could you repeat the question?
oh, yes,
That
yes.
I'm online?
So the question was, if we looked at the DNA of everyone here who is living with HIV and compared it to individuals who don't even, and see if there's a difference for susceptibility or disease progression, I would say probably not, just because these are relatively rare events. So when we do this at a population level, we use about 4,000 individuals because some of the differences are so small. And so we need large amounts of people in order to do this effectively. You're looking at 4, 5, 6,000 people and looking at the differences on that large of a scale. But great question. How does the body make T cells? So T cells are part of the immune system and they form in, I'm not an immunologist and I should probably know this. My focus is on genetics. But so when the body is forming these immune cells, you have these kind of, we'll call them ancestor cells. And when your body needs different types of cells, it'll send signals to say, can you make a B cell? Can you make a T cell? These are progenitor cells, I believe. So when your body needs a certain cell type, it sends this signal that you need to start creating more. And definitely during infection as well, your body will say, we need a lot of these right now. So it'll make even more T cells. But the problem is when that infection clears, these cells are still looking for something to target. So your body actually clears them out after infection as well. So it ramps them up by sending a signal saying, we got an infection, it's go time. And then it says, we got to slow down. Especially during something like the flu, when you have too many of these cells, that's what mainly causes damage in the lungs. So it's not a virus that infects that causes damage, it's your immune response as you're trying to clear these out. So your body sends signals to increase them, and they also send signals to decrease them. Key points. So that's a good time to summarize because we're at 29 minutes here. So microbes are all around us. Microbes are things like a fungus. These are things like viruses, parasites, bacteria, and viruses are non-living organisms. Our first line of defense is our skin. My favorite part of the innate immune system is crying, and our adaptive immune system has a very long memory. So this is why vaccines work. As well as our DNA can help predict susceptibility. So if individuals are more or less susceptible to different diseases, that can be part of our DNA as well. Thank you. And any final questions? I won't open up the chat, but if there's questions in the chat, feel free to share them out.
Hi, I was just gonna request if you can please go back to the slide before. Yes, that I will just take a quick photo. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
It is a large topic to talk about microbes, the immune system, and DNA all in one. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to the coordinators as well. I'm happy to answer any questions for them.
I have a question actually. Going off of what Rebecca was saying, can you go back to the slide? So Rebecca was asking if our DNA, if people diagnosed with HIV, you look at their DNA, did you find any commonalities that predict susceptibility? Is that like that?
Predicting susceptibility, probably not. Typically with these types of studies, the way that they're designed, they're a little more feasible to find things that make people resistant to disease as opposed to susceptibility. But I will say for DNA testing with individuals or people living with HIV, one thing that's typically done is looking at, they can predict whether or not certain drugs work better or worse through DNA testing. So that's something that's typically done as well. No problem.
So, is it true that, like with the DNA and HIV, is it possible that it can actually attack someone's immune system faster than others? Is that what they're talking about?
So when we're looking at something like HIV, let's go here. So part of our adaptive immune response is having those T cells and B cells. So HIV likes to infect T cells. So it'll go into T cells and cause damage to your adaptive immune system, or it can stay dormant inside of those cells as well. Then taking antiretroviral therapy reduces that circulating virus, so you don't have prolonged infection like that. Yeah, that dormancy.
So it doesn't matter what kind of blood type you have? As long as you're on medication.
I believe so. That's a good question. I don't know if there's differences in progression based on blood type, but it will be something I look up for my thesis. Yes.
HIV and AIDS, the same thing?
Yeah, so HIV is the virus, and AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So over time, your body progresses to AIDS, and that's typically characterized by a decreased immune response. So there's one progresses into the other, but HIV is the virus, AIDS is the syndrome. Good question. Awesome. If that is it for the questions, I was thinking, Ms. Sandy, you have one? Yes. Perfect. I thought something that might be fun is looking a little bit more at DNA, talking a little bit more about genetics. And I actually have the results of my old 23andMe test up, so we can look at kind of what that means and break that down a little bit. I'll have to stop sharing and I will have to reopen it. Oh no. There we go. And we all see this? I believe so. Awesome. So, DNA tests. DNA tests are really cool because you send in a sample of your spit. It is far more spit than you would think that they would require for this. It is a full tube, and then they take that, they pull out any cells in there, and they look at the DNA, sequence it, and they look at a lot of these large studies, and they say, does those DNA sequences match different traits? So one of those particular traits that I wanted to look at is age-related macular degeneration. So when they are looking through these different tests, yes. With what means? Absolutely. So age-related macular degeneration, whew, that's a mouthful. This is something that some people get over time where you have vision loss. It's irreversible vision loss among older adults. I don't consider myself to be that old, but it's a risk for me apparently in the future. So what we look at with these is it's looking at your entire DNA and it's asking, yes, question.
Jacqueline asked, is there other DNA tests that can be used like hair?
Like hair. So hair, it is kind of a unique thing. You can see in TV shows where they look at hair for DNA, and it's actually that root of the hair that they need, because that's where the cells are. So something like a spit test is the least invasive, because I don't think anybody wants to pull out like a wad of hair in order to send that in, right? Spit test is kind of the easiest. So now what these tests say is you'll notice specific language that they're using. They're saying increased risk, because even when it's present in our DNA sequences, that doesn't mean something is bound to occur. You might have DNA sequences that say you're more or less susceptible to different diseases, but how that actually represents itself might not be the true way. There might be other things going on, lifestyle choices that you make that reduce that risk. So especially when you're looking at these things, it says lifestyle and other factors can affect your risk. So when you know about these in advance, let's say you're at risk for something like type 2 diabetes, then you can make lifestyle changes to help prevent that in the future. And they give you all of this jargon for these tests that we are not going to go into in much detail because I also don't understand it that well. I just have faith that what they're telling me is accurate here. And so when you go looking through this, it starts telling you, how many people are typically seen with these effects, how popular or how frequent is age-related macular degeneration, and it gives you the ability to share this information with family members that have also done the test. So you can see whether or not it runs in a family or if it's kind of something that occurred recently in your family history. Now, I wanted to spend a little bit of time and talk about how odd some of these things that they look at are. So a lot of our personality, or some of our personality, I should say, can boil down to our genetics. Now, some of it is based on how we were raised, what our households were like. But as we saw with the picture of me and my dad, we are very similar. It was 3 weeks ago, I got mistaken for him when I was out eating dinner, and he is 62. I am not 62, so I was a little bit shocked when that happened. But, you know, when you have DNA, when it's expressed in a similar fashion, then you can have these effects. One that is very common that people like to complain about is cilantro. So there's actually a region of the genome of your DNA that will cause some people to taste cilantro as soap, which is, some people think it's common, some people think it's odd, but if you don't like cilantro, you likely really don't like cilantro. And I am in that family as well, and it says, seems like it's slightly higher odds. And it starts to break down these different effects. Now, the more out there that you're looking at each of these associations, when you're going away from something that's clear cut, like type 1 diabetes, breast cancer risk, and you're going into these more strange results, you take them more with a grain of salt. These are, once again, percentages as opposed to something that is bound to happen or not happen. But it's interesting how there are things like mosquito bite frequency, where you might hear people going out on camping trips saying, I didn't get bit by any mosquitoes. Other people are getting bit a lot. Well, some of that actually comes down to our DNA. The different proteins, different molecules that are expressed in our body, they can actually cause you to be less susceptible to mosquito bites as well. DNA is a fantastic tool. It's one that's starting to come into something called precision medicine or personalized medicine. But when we're talking about DNA, genes are the functional unit. Humans have about 20,000 different genes that make up our bones, our tissues, our hair color. And so DNA, when it comes down to the fundamentals, I think it's pretty cool. But if anyone ever has any questions about these things, I'm also happy to answer them. But I might be out of time there. I have 5 minutes? Oh, perfect. We can talk about anything that we want to at this point.
How accurate is that 23andMe?
So the accuracy of the test comes down to the computer models that they make, really. So when you sequence the DNA, the technology is the same. So you get to read the same sequence from different technologies. They're all fairly accurate at this point. But each company says that they have their own unique databases for calculating these things. And that's where it becomes a little bit more iffy. When we're talking about things like our different traits, these weird ones, like if you like cilantro, the reliability drops. But other ones, such as looking at things like your risk of getting a bald spot in the future, those are typically more reliable. When it's something that is easily determined, so things that run in the family, for example, bald spots, and I'm happy to report nobody in my family has had a bald spot. That's a little more clear cut. When you go through these tests, I really look at these for medical information because that can help to influence lifestyle changes, as opposed to these kind of funnier ones. But I think they're all fun. But so when we're talking about germs, when we're talking about immune system, when we're talking about our DNA has an influence over our immune system, susceptibility to pathogens, resistance to pathogens, how we react to things. But the most important thing to remember with all of that is lifestyle changes are very important as well. So just because the DNA says one thing doesn't mean that that's clear cut. Making lifestyle changes can definitely have a strong influence on that as well. And when you talk about something like HIV in particular, looking at environmental factors far more important than the DNA factors. Environmental factors have a much larger effect than DNA. DNA is just sometimes easier to study. Yes.
Can your lifestyle change or can your lifestyle changes change your DNA?
Can your lifestyle changes change your DNA? That's actually a question that is the focus of an entire group of studies. It's called epigenetics. So your DNA can't change. However, there are different things on that DNA that say activate now, don't activate now. And so lifestyle changes can influence that. There are studies that come out of small towns in Europe where someone, let's say, the grandmother in a family went through an area of famine. Her kids did not, so their kids have normal weight. However, when they have kids, so that woman's grandchild can actually have a different body type because their grandmother went through a famine. So lifestyle changes don't actually affect the sequence, but it can affect how it's expressed. Yeah.
Like if you do say like meditation and yoga and do all that stuff and become very, and depression is like, okay, like you can handle it, then could your offspring be better equipped to deal with depression? Would the DNA change on that level?
It might express how, it might change how it's expressed. So it doesn't change the DNA, but it can change the expression of different things. The impact that certain things have, I haven't read studies on it, but I would assume that things like less stress, so meditation can definitely have an influence. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, say if you take DNA from a little kid and you figure everything out, and the kid redoes the test in about 20, 30 years down the line, does it stay the same or does it change?
Good question. So the question is, doing a DNA test on somebody early in life and later in life, does it change? It won't change. So the DNA will stay the same throughout their life. So when you do a DNA test, I believe there are some that are done on kids as well, looking for certain types of conditions that have a strong impact early in life. That won't change over time. Great question.
Does the stress affect the immune system?
Yes. So not only does things like stress, I would say the main part of reducing stress has an impact on the immune system. So when you have a lot of stress in your body, you can have more inflammatory reactions to things. So having a little bit more of a calmer demeanor, practicing meditation, absolutely can help reduce inflammation by the immune system. I would say that would be the main effect over something like changing the DNA and epigenetic markers.
Does the environment affect our immune system?
Does the environment affect our immune system? I tried to stay away from this topic as much as possible. So yes, the environment, things like diet have a huge impact. When we say environment, we don't necessarily mean like weather. We mean like active lifestyles, we mean diet, we mean pretty much anything that has an impact on our life that's not already encoded in our body. And that has a major impact on our immune system and many aspects of our life. At the end of the day, the effect that DNA has is relatively little compared to the environment on things. Yes.
So is it your genes that determine like the strength of your innate immune system? Or is that something that can be affected by say, environmental factors or other things?
Yeah, so the question is, does your genes or DNA have a strong impact on your innate immune system, adaptive immune system, or is that more environmental? I would say for the vast majority of these things, environmental is more important. There are some things that are genetic. There are certain conditions where individuals, they don't have the genes necessary in order to have a functional immune system. And in that case, that becomes a problem because they aren't able to develop a proper immune response, a proper adaptive response. So any bacteria and pathogen getting in causes a lot of problems. But for the vast majority, environmental is more important. Yes, question.
If, environment impacts our immune system, therefore, our immune system can be changed, our DNA, in the long run, could that be changed?
So, when you are born, your DNA is going to be the same throughout your life. However, the environment, what it can change is how certain things are expressed. And that's called epigenetics, or the regulation of that DNA. Lifestyle changes and environmental factors have a very large effect on the immune system. They have a lower effect on DNA and expression of DNA. What you can see though is things that skip generations. So certain choices that you make in your life can affect kids and grandkids.
So theoretically, then it could change the DNA.
It can change the sequence. That's the only thing. Yeah, so it changes the expression, but not the actual sequence.
Are there any questions on that?
I just want to say I got 4 more questions now than I do during my regular seminars, so this is fantastic.
Thank you very much. So we are gonna have our post test. We're gonna do it right now. Thank you so much, Riley. That was phenomenal. And thanks everyone for all your questions.